TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of TellyCast, where I'm joined by Paul Robinson, Director of Creative Media Partners, as we preview next week's MIPCOM. And on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, the traditional main 3 days of MIPCOM, we'll also be producing some short daily telecast episodes rounding up the key news stories of the day and their implications, with the TV industry's most influential and clued-up journalists from Variety, Broadcast and Deadline Hollywood. But back to today's show. Paul, welcome to TellyCast.
Great pleasure to be here. Hi, Justin.
I'm really delighted you could come on. And you're something of a globe hopper when it comes to doing business around the world in television. How have you managed to keep things going in your business through the pandemic?
Well, it has been very strange not going to Terminal 5. That is my second home, and I haven't been on a plane since the end of February when I just got back from Kids Screen, Miami and then New York. And so since then, I've flown nowhere. So it has been very different. I think from our point of view, we do all sorts of things. We do content, we do channels, we do some technology and some basic, strategic and operational consulting. The event business has clearly been a tough one. I mean, all the event business has basically disappeared. But we have found new opportunities, particularly for example, in terms of digital training, digital mentoring, and training particularly for small and medium-sized media companies who want to scale up. So that's been a whole new business strand. But aside from that, it's been a bit about trying to reinvent what you do. And rather than spending time, sitting in the Ivy or sitting in Costa Coffee or in somebody else's office, it's Zoom and Teams and Skype calls all day. So the only issue, I think, is my eyes feel sore at the end of the day.
Well, adaptation and regeneration, I think, that is the order of the day across the whole of the TV industry. And next week, it's MIPCOM, Paul, but not as we know it.
Well, no, the first time that MIPCOM has been virtual. I think we were all hoping that MIPCOM might be the first event that might actually still be a physical event, but obviously it hasn't been possible. So, yeah, very, very different. I mean, I've been booking meetings on the MIPCOM Online Plus, and I must say I found the service pretty good, actually. I was a bit skeptical, how's this all going to work? Because I'm used to arriving on a Saturday, Saturday you have a dinner and you sort of see some friends. Sunday's a fairly quiet day, unless you're going to MIP Junior, which was always on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And then Monday, you start in a vengeance and have about 14 meetings a day every half hour. And of course, what you're doing then is running up and down the Croisette. You're going from the Majestic to the Martinez, back to the Palais. And then someone says, oh, can I have a meeting at the Grand? And you've got to divert. So you spend a lot of time walking. So one thing will be less fit doing it this way, because we're not doing all the walking and running up and down. But I have to say, fixing meetings on MIPCOM Online Plus has been really a good experience. And it's very easy to work. It's a good platform. You can find people. In fact, what's really good about it, you can find people who you may not otherwise have contact details for. I mean, if you're trying to, find a new potential client and you don't have their email address or you don't have their phone number, it can be quite difficult to reach that person. And sometimes they ignore you. Now, of course, with this new system, you actually have got access to all of those people. So that's a big plus. The other thing about it is it's really weird to be doing it so late, because normally I'd start booking MIPCOM meetings end of August, really, to be absolutely sure. And even then, sometimes I have the odd person say, oh, I'm already full. I don't believe it. That means they don't want to see me, but that's fair enough. But, August was when you started, August, September. And I've been booking meetings literally this week, which is quite unusual. So it's a different timescale, but I think it's going to be good. But let's wait and see.
Whenever I've spoken to you ahead of the event, you're usually in that booking process, booking those 30-minute meeting slots throughout the summer. So you're finding that the process of booking those meetings easy and fairly seamless, which is good. And it sounds like some people may be more accessible than at other times. And I'm not sure many people really adopted using the online portal. Obviously, it's been there. It's always been there for delegates to use. It's always been a very, very secondary kind of solution. It's very much about people emailing and dealing with people's assistants or dealing with people direct, to do it a little bit old school and just put it in the diary manually. But this time, maybe people be more accessible.
I think so. I mean, I'm certainly getting a sense of that there are people who maybe otherwise might not have been on before who are on now. So certainly senior people who probably would never have used the service before, they've relied entirely probably on their assistants or, booked in other ways, are on the system. So no, it's definitely a huge step up in terms of access. And also the navigation is very easy. The other thing I really like about it is that every year what I do is I look at the conference program and think, oh, I want to go and see that. I want to go and see the other. And you put it in your diary. And then, of course, someone comes along who's really important, it's Netflix or Amazon or something like that. And so, of course, you take the meeting when you're offered the meeting and it goes right across the conference session you wanted to. What you can do with this system now is you can actually put all those conference sessions in you want to see into your schedule straight away. And then when it comes to offer meetings to people, it avoids those particular time slots, which is really good. So I've managed now to make sure I am going to see part of the conference this year, but also I'm getting all the meetings scheduled around it.
That's been one of the differences, obviously, of MIPCOM Online Plus, as we should call it, as opposed to just MIPCOM, which is obviously the physical event. Apart from the fact that we're obviously not physically there on the Croisette, how do you think this year's event will change the MIPCOM experience for delegates?
Well, I mean, clearly what you're going to miss is all the physical contact. I mean, you're going to miss the Grand. I mean, the Grand is part of the tradition. And, whilst people might think, oh, it's just a booze up, going to the Grand and having loads of drinks after your dinner, till the small hours of the morning, actually, you can meet people there and you can develop conversations until they've had maybe one or two too many gin and tonics. But certainly earlier in the evening, you can have quite good conversations. And often you can have a better conversation when you're not in that sort of regime of a tight half-hour meeting, and it's slightly more informal. So we'll miss that. We'll miss bumping into people on the Croisette. I mean, one of the other things I do is I'm walking up and down all the time, and I'm always bumping into people who I haven't seen for a while. You say, hi, how are you? Sometimes it's people you haven't got a meeting with, and you go, oh, have you got time for a meeting? And you can slot something in later because you just bumped into them on the Croisette. And so you're going to miss that. And also, obviously, the parties are legendary, and I think the parties are important. I mean, particularly, the parties that take place on some of the rather nice yachts moored around the side there. I mean, I won't deny it. I do enjoy those parties, and I will miss those. So I'm going to have to find something that's rocking a bit and got endless bar and try and replicate the boat experience. Yeah.
Well, there's no very thin and precarious gangplanks to worry about.
That's true. I mean, and those are fine when you're going to the party. It's when you're leaving it's a problem.
I'm going to certainly miss that. And I have to say that, the experience of being at the Grand, not so much the prices of the drinks, obviously, when you're the one who ends up being at the end of a round and, that's when you sort of feel it. Maybe not that point, but maybe in the morning when you look at your receipts. But I'm going to miss that face-to-face, as is everybody. But I think the industry has now come to the point where I think we've all known that it's not going to go ahead, for the last couple of months. And, it's obviously been the victim of not only the pandemic, but really the travel bans that some of the big American, but also LATAM and global media companies have said to their employees, right, we're not traveling. That's not happening. You're going to be staying. In some cases, you're going to be working from home for the next year or so. So it's a shame that we're obviously not gathering together. But again, reinvention, this is the time that digital solutions come to the forefront. So we're looking forward to maybe this digital aspect of the event becoming part of a new hybrid going forward for MIPCOM and obviously for MIPTV as well.
I think so, yes. I mean, I think what's also quite good for MIPCOM is it's not as though this is the first time people have had to now do meetings in a digital way. We've all been doing this really since March, using our computers, sitting in either home offices or in company offices or in your kitchen or wherever it is you sit and do meetings. So I think people have already started to change the way they work and accept that they're going to do meetings via digital platforms rather than physically. So I think in that sense, MIPCOM is already going to benefit from a changed experience and a changed perception. It is a bit, when you're presenting animation, as for example I do, it can be quite difficult to show it. You can't sort of physically put your computer on and then show it, or you can't hand over the nice presentation. But you can share screen and use all those tools. You can always follow up with email. So I think it's going to change things forever. How it's going to change MIPCOM next year, I don't know. I suspect that probably we're going to see a combination of this new world and some physical. But I don't think MIPCOM, as we've known it in the past, is going to be the MIPCOM of the future.
And obviously, MIPCOM Online Plus, it should be said, is available for an extended period of time, isn't it? It's actually a few weeks rather than just being the traditional sort of 3-4 days, or if you're including MIP Junior, sort of 5 or 6 days. Let's see how the platform is used after next week and maybe the week after, and maybe that it will really come into its own at that point.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that. I think not having to really squeeze everything into 1 week is really good. It also allows follow-ups as well. So I think that's a big plus of this new system. Now,
the conference sessions this year have some pretty big names, and they don't come much bigger than Netflix co-CEO and Chief Content Officer Ted Sarandos. What do you think we can expect from his session on Monday afternoon?
Well, I think it's a great coup to have him speak. And Netflix continues, of course, to do amazing numbers. The latest figures are about 183 million subscribers worldwide to Netflix, and it continues to pile on numbers. I mean, what's critical about Netflix, of course, is its balance sheet. I mean, its balance sheet has got this massive, massive debt of multiple billions in it. But the reason that the shareholders tolerate that is because of Netflix's performance, because it continues to add subscribers. It's growing ARPU because it's managed to increase its prices successfully with minimal churn. It's still got really way below benchmark average churn, I think still below about 10%, which is an incredible number. And it's having an incredible success rate at new shows. I mean, it continually brings on new, exciting shows. I think also what's been interesting has been the success they've had with original movies. Obviously, they've not had many P1 movies because most of the pay platforms in the local territories in the UK, for example, Sky, have the P1 movies. So Netflix gets second or third window. But their original movies are really getting very good. So I think it's going to be about what's the strategy going forward and how they continue that momentum. Because, is there a ceiling to this? I mean, 183 million is an amazing number. Where can they get to? 200, 250? What's the ceiling?
Obviously, Netflix has been a fortunate beneficiary of the lockdown, beating its growth numbers quite significantly. But it's also now starting to cull shows, maybe in the third or the fourth season, as we saw with Glow last week. And it's really starting to face some real competition from a range of new streamers now. Disney Plus, it's amazing that Disney Plus, it seems like it's been around forever, but it actually only launched internationally. I think it was the end of March, beginning of April. So it's extraordinary, but the success that Disney Plus has had. But obviously, we've also got Peacock, HBO Max, of course, Amazon Prime, and also the AVODs as well that are really starting to appear on the landscape. How do you think Netflix is going to tackle the next year, particularly when we can expect a recession, presumably, resulting in a significant number of job losses and consumers really looking at watching their wallets through the winter?
Well, taking the AVODs first, I think what's interesting is Pluto obviously is expanding pretty rapidly, and they've announced some new territories in the last few days in Europe, now backed, of course, by Viacom. But the advertising market is currently suffering. Certainly all the free-to-air broadcasters in the UK have got numbers way below what they were budgeting for. So advertising is clearly a less reliable revenue stream. It's interesting that Peacock in the US is also AVOD. I think there seems to be less resistance to AVOD in the US than there is in Europe. So AVOD is definitely a source of great growth, but I think probably Netflix will be looking at the other paying subscriber models. Disney Plus, well, I mean, amazing success. I mean, gosh, they got about 5 million subs in Europe within about half an hour of launching. It was an incredible number, and Disney Plus is piling on numbers. They've been very smart, obviously, having a low subscriber price, way below Netflix. So, of course, they can argue it's good value for money, and I suspect over time that price will go up. I suspect that Disney Plus is not a direct competitor for Netflix, because I don't think you would have either one or the other, because Disney Plus is very much for family. Netflix is a more of a broad service. So I think those two are complementary. What's interesting, I think, is what else will fit into that basket. If you think you've got maybe, if the average household will take 2 or 3 SVOD services, is what the research suggests, who's going to fit into that basket? I mean, Amazon, yes, Amazon Prime is great because obviously of free delivery. Now TV in the UK, we've got Discovery Service, HBO Max. There's lots of services, Peacock. Which ones are going to make it? Netflix seems to have still a great lead, whilst it continues to have the sort of commissioning strength it has, it's got great economies of scale because, the reason that Netflix works so brilliantly is because it's across 183 million households. So all of that cost of production is amortized over, many, many territories and many, many subscribers. So I think Netflix is in a strong position, but it's got to keep doing what it's doing and keep innovating. And it'd be interesting to see whether Netflix intends to diversify. There's been lots of discussion about sport, for example, and they've said no to sport. But sport might be a genre for the future. They've clearly got to keep on driving forward, and that's going to be tough.
And things like sports rights have been really disrupted in their own right by this whole pandemic as well. So I guess we're going to see lots of interesting rights acquisitions going on right across the industry when it comes to streamers or indeed linear networks or cables, etc. It's certainly an interesting time. So following on from the Netflix address, we've got Sky CEO Jeremy Darroch's keynote, and he's going to be speaking with Sky News' climate change correspondent Lisa Holland. I can't remember a higher profile industry session dedicated to discussing sustainability in TV. Is this a watershed moment for the industry?
I think it is, partly because MIP have said this is going to be an annual lecture, and Jeremy Darroch is giving the inaugural lecture and award for climate change. And Sky have always been pretty much at the front of this. Their Sky Ocean Rescue Initiative has been something they've really championed. If you go to Sky's building in Osterley in the UK, there you can see all the plastic, and they've really, really made a huge thing about it. I get a sense that sustainability is now absolutely integral in two ways. One, in terms of how we as an industry operate. Can we operate in a more sustainable way, a more friendly way towards the planet in terms of recycling, reusing, turning off light bulbs, flying less? Well, that's been forced on us, but that will clearly continue. But also portrayal on the air. And I'm expecting to, at this particular MIPCOM, to see a lot of sustainability-led shows, both in terms of factual and in terms of drama. I think this is now integral to what we're doing. And I think this is very important that MIPCOM have actually given this sort of profile to sustainability. And they've got someone like Jeremy, who is obviously leaving Sky, as we know, now that Comcast have taken over. But it'd be interesting to see what he's got to say. But he's been driving this, fairly quietly for a number of years at Sky. But
with the greening of TV, if you like, surely there comes more cost.
Well, there does. I mean, for example, I was this week at the Festival of Licensing, which is the renamed brand licensing event. And I wanted to get some brochures printed, and I wanted to make sure they were printed on sustainable paper, recycled paper. And when you do that, you find the cost of doing so is about twice the cost of printing it on regular paper. So I bit the bullet and paid for the more expensive printing. But I mean, whilst that's the case, it is going to be very difficult to say to businesses, you know what, do that, but it's going to cost you more money because, we've all got to look at the bottom line. We've got to make sure we can afford our staff. Businesses must make profit. So I think short term, there will be an on cost. So there will be, a limit to what people are prepared to do. But I think over time, when you start making it part of your practice, in the same way we're now going to, I think, make digital conferencing part of the way we work. It may not be the whole solution once we've got the vaccine and COVID-19 is no longer, driving the way we operate society. But I think that sustainability is also going to be much more endemic and sort of integral to how we operate, as opposed to it being something we think about if we possibly can.
And presumably co-production is one of the answers here when it comes to actually content creation. Less flights needed, cutting costs, and building those local production partnerships. That will also hopefully spread the growth of the industry to many other territories. So perhaps it become even more international in terms of production growth.
I think that's right. And co-production is essential because we're in a global world now, and you need to make sure that you're taking into account all sorts of different points of view. We haven't really talked about diversity, but diversity of talent, not only in terms of, gender, ethnic origin, but also geographical origin. You get different points of view. And when you tell a story, sitting in London, or you tell a story sitting in Buenos Aires, or you tell a story sitting in Munich or in LA, it has a different perspective and a different point of view. So that's essential. The other thing is in the kids business, which is the one obviously I'm most involved in, co-production is essential. It's the only way to finance a show. So you can get a certain amount from pre-sales, a certain amount from deficit financing and other sources of loans and things. But ultimately, co-production is the way in which you can finance your show. So yes, more co-production is the way we're going, but I think there's lots of benefits to that.
And talking about diversity, coming next on the conference sessions, we've got playwright, writer, actor, producer, and director Tyler Perry discussing his career, and also Academy Award winner Matthew A. Cherry receiving the Kids Trendsetter Award. It's great to see some diversity amongst the conference headliners this year, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Perry's got a very high profile and he's done a lot. He's a writer, he's an actor, he's a producer, he's a director. And he's had lots of, he's actually had lots and lots of success with lots of different productions. So no, very good indeed. I think what's also good about this, it doesn't feel tokenistic. It feels right. It feels like these are the people we want to hear from. And again, it just gives us sort of an extra voice. It gives a different dimension, different way to think about things. And I think they've done a very good job this year producing a conference that's got a combination of not only heavy hitters, but also people from diverse backgrounds, diverse points of view. So I really welcome it. And I think it's good because it's really on merit. It's not tokenistic. And that's really, really important.
So moving on to the country of honour this year, which is Korea, we've seen a global explosion in Korean entertainment content, not just in TV formats, but also music and film as well. The country's really having a moment, and it's known as the Hallyu, the Korean wave. But looking from a strictly TV perspective, how do you see Korea's place in the global marketplace now?
Well, Korea's become a very significant player. I mean, you think of the economy, they're about the same size as the UK. They've got about the same population as us, a very similar GDP to us. So that's the sort of scale of Korea. And it really is punching above its weight. Whether you look at, music, look at K-pop, the influence K-pop has had. Look at Gangnam Style. Look at the kids animation business. I mean, certainly if you want really fantastic, cute preschool animation, Korea is up there as probably one of the top 3 producers in the world for beautiful quality, and their studios are absolutely amazing. I have got a quick story to tell you about Korea. As I did a call this week with someone in Seoul, and they were pitching me this new kids show, which is about lizards, about geckos. It was an educational show for young kids, and they were pitching this show. And then they said, "Oh, hang on a second." And the CEO turned round, and there he had the gecko on his hand. And then the chief creative officer had the gecko in his hand. And I thought, wow, you don't get this in a meeting in MIPCOM, do you?
No, absolutely not. But that sounds fascinating. Well, good luck with that project. I hope you end up doing something with those guys.
Well, I hope the lizards are well cared for. They looked like they'd been well fed and watered and were loved by their owners sitting in the office. But I mean, I thought, wow, we're all looking when we're pitching to find a different way of pitching. And there they were using Zoom, and there were the lizards in the office. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I couldn't not talk about it. And here I am talking about it now. So it just shows it had an impact.
Yeah, very good. And that brings us neatly on to MIP Junior as well, obviously, which actually used to exist as somewhat of an island, if you like, within MIPCOM, or alongside MIPCOM, if you like, for 2 days over the weekend. Most recently, it was housed at the Marriott, which is a good 15 minutes walk or so down the Croisette from the Palais. But this year, it's housed within the wider MIPCOM online plus virtual event portal. Paul, you've been a regular at MIP Junior for many years. Take us through how this will change the experience for delegates in the kids' TV industry.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, Saturday and Sunday were basically MIP Junior. That's how it worked. So you'd arrive in Cannes on Friday, you do MIP Junior Saturday and Sunday. And as you say, most recently it's been at the Marriott, or the Palace Stephanois, it used to be called. Before that, it was at the Martinez, which was even further down. And then, in fact, one year they went right down the far end of the Croisette, another mile down there. And so, it was about half an hour to walk to...
Palm Beach, that's right, yeah.
Palm Beach, about half an hour to walk back to the Majestic. So it was self-contained. It's now been integrated, which I think is not a bad thing. I think what is interesting is the viewing room, which might be a rather anachronistic way of doing things. But what used to happen, of course, was many people would come for 2 days. They'd sit in that basement room in the hotel, and they'd sit at the screen, and they'd screen all the new kids' animation. They just sit there and screen it. As a seller, it was fantastic, because on Sunday night you'd get your report and you could see who'd screened your show, where they were from, their email address, their designation, and how long they'd watched your show for, which would tell you pretty clearly whether they were interested or not in your show. But 2 days in a room watching TV does seem a little bit maybe old-fashioned. Now that screening room's still there, but of course it's a digital screening room, and it's going to be, again, not just over the weekend, it's going to be spread. The conference itself was self-contained, and I don't know whether having that as part of the main conference loses traction a little bit. It slightly loses its identity, I think. But overall, look, kids is part of the overall business. And, there are more and more connections between how we make kids shows and how we make adult shows. So I think overall, having it integrated is a good thing.
Yeah, and maybe it's a pointer as well towards MIP TV, because I noticed there's an ad for MIP TV promoting hopefully the physical event happening in the spring, and under one roof we're going to be looking at docs, formats, drama, and kids under one badge, which is quite a big change from how it used to be as well.
It is. I think it's good in terms of bringing everyone together. I mean, sometimes the buyers are different. I mean, the kids buyer might be different to the unscripted buyer or whatever, or the docs buyer. But I think bringing everyone together is good. It also, of course, in terms of MIP, looks better value. I think there is an issue about cost here because, MIPCOM is not inexpensive. By the time you've paid for your badge, paid for your flights, you've paid for your hotel, and the hotels in Cannes are not that cheap. You've bought your coffees at the Cafe Roma, which, lovely coffee, but not inexpensive either. There is a lot of cost there. So you do need to demonstrate value for money if you're going to have a physical event. And I think this is very smart to, again, do more to demonstrate that Reed Meadham is listening to the need to be economic, because I suspect that in the light of COVID-19, many companies are going to reduce their expenses and their travel budgets.
And finally, let's talk about screenings. You mentioned screenings when it comes to MIP Junior. Now, screenings are always a key part of any MIPCOM event. And from what I can see, some are scheduled as live events and some available on demand. Can you take us through how screenings will work at this year's MIPCOM?
Yeah, well, as you say, I mean, what used to happen was you'd use one of these salons in the Palais and you'd go along and you'd arrive and, quite often there'd be drinks or there'd be freebies and you'd all sit in a room and you'd watch the thing together. Now, some of these are on demand, as you say. So you can go in, you can watch whenever you like, and others are on fixed times. I've got sort of two minds about this. I'm sort of thinking of this too in terms of, the way some of the SVODs work. When you put all 13 episodes of a season up in one go, there is a risk that you binge on the whole thing and you don't maybe, watch them in quite the same way because you're getting through them very fast. If they're once a week, you sort of create an event out of that and it makes it a bit more special. And you go, Tuesdays when this show comes out. I wonder whether the idea of having a particular appointment to watch does sort of make it more special in a way and make it feel more anticipated. But on the other hand, if you miss it and it's gone. If it's available all the time, then, it'll fit in with your diary as we sort of now expect. We don't want to, we're not going to wait for someone to say it's ready. We want to have it whenever we want it, wherever we want it on any device. I got to think, I think the screening somehow, I think there's something about all doing it together and all being in it together and then talking about it and having a beer afterwards and discussing it at the party afterwards. So I'm not sure about the screenings. I think that might be more difficult. I think also they're easier to avoid in a way as well. You've got so many other pressures on your diary and you're not actually in the venue. I think the screenings might be one area they might want to look at again. I'm just not sure where that's going to work.
Paul, thank you very much for taking us through that. It's going to be a really fascinating few days and actually a few weeks to see how MIPCOM Online Plus adapts to this current dilemma that we're all under, this inability to travel. But I'm sure that the TV industry is going to come together and make the best of it we possibly can, and look forward to better days when we can all get together and have that glass of rosé on La Croisette.
Are you buying?
Well, I didn't say that, did I?
Oh, well, I was just asking. No, I agree. Look, I look forward to that. I mean, the receptions and the grand and the parties, they are, you sound like they're trivializing, but it is about relationships. Business is about relationships. You need to trust the person you're working with. You need to get to know them, know what their needs are. And that a lot of that is done, I think, in person. So I do think that what they've done here is a great job this year. I think, given we can't meet physically, I think MIPCOM is looking very, very good. And I feel optimistic about it. But I do miss the physical contact. And I do think you need to sometimes, maybe not as much as we have in the past, you need sometimes to have a face-to-face and have a beer with someone and shake their hand, hopefully, and do a deal. So let's see. I suspect the future is going to be a hybrid of both.
Well, wishing you all the very best for the week, Paul, and good luck. And I hope you have lots of success. There are 2,000 buyers there, I believe, from what I read today. So that's a positive sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign. And mine's a gin and tonic.
Right. Well, that's it for this special MIPCOM preview episode of TellyCast. Join me on Monday when I'll be joined by Variety's international editor, Manori Ravindran, to round up the key news stories of day one of MIPCOM Online Plus. And our regular full telecast show will be back, as usual, on Thursday, when my guests are Richard Tulkhart, co-CEO of Buccaneer Media, and David Michel, co-founder of Federation Entertainment and Cottonwood Media. Until then, stay safe.